Let's look then at some of the possible solutions that no doubt have been used. I was just thinking, the first thing I noted down here was that we often don't find out, because people aren't very keen to share this information, as to why projects that they've done have failed. Now, there's some requirement in government to reveal that, isn't there? Even that's not always useful, because it might have been with the initial requirements, as we've already said. Would there be some benefit in us communicating a little bit more openly between organisations, so that we could share the knowledge that will actually make all projects?
This is a difficult one. I think you'd find it very hard to justify for any individual organisation that there's a benefit from them being open. Within an organisation, quite definitely.
Right.
If you're starting to share that information between organisations, then, well, there are forums for it within specific industries where CEOs and CTOs from organisations will get together and in a safe environment. It will be a nice thing to see, but I'd be surprised if it happens, to be honest.
That's too idyllic, is it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
And I think it has to be delivered in an environment, a culture of continuous improvement and not blame, not a witch hunt.
Yes.
And I think that is one of the issues that I think there's a very pragmatic issue. At the end of a project, everybody's tired and had enough. And frankly, looking back over the past and going, well, we could have done that better. It's not a popular subject. It's what you're concentrating on at the end is the post-project party. You've hired your disco boat and you're going off down the Thames. But I think there is a huge problem that a lot of people don't like to look back. But I think that I would rather see a sort of continual conversation about what can we do better to keep this continuous improvement. Lessons learned, I'm not sure is the best name for
Lessons
this, really.
learned often ends up as file and forget, quite frankly, doesn't it? And to be honest with you, at the end of the project, it's too late to learn the lessons. Agile and lean approaches to project delivery emphasise an inspect and adapt cycle that happens frequently. They break the projects up into short 2-week or 1-month iterations, and at the end of each 2-week or 1-month iteration, you do a retrospective. And at that point, you say, okay, how did that last period go? How can we improve it? So this truly is continuous improvement in that you're doing it all the time, and secondly, you're doing it forever. Forever. You never stop. You never stop. Right. And that's where we need to learn lessons. Now, that can be done within an organisation, but it requires the openness, it requires the lack of, getting away from a blame culture. It requires some courage on the part of the people working the project to be open about what's going on. And you can do that within an organisation. And that, for me, is probably the biggest thing that organisations can do to become successful. Getting that happening across organisations and sharing that information across organisations, as I say,
that's not going to happen.
I'm doubtful.
I think
it's a struggle particularly in competitive environments, because generally the reason we do projects or programs is to drive competitive advantage in our organisation, and therefore we're not terribly keen on sharing with our competitors how good or not we were at driving competitive advantage. Some of the places I have seen it work, and some of the things that we encourage, and I'd encourage people watching this to engage in, is that concept of executive roundtables, of finding places where actually non-competing organisations can come together post the event, 6 months maybe post the event, and share information. And we do a lot of work in not-for-profit organisations, and actually they tend to be quite good at this, because they have much more altruistic aims rather than competitive aims, and therefore they're far more likely to want to share information, and being able to pair up people who've been through similar experiences is really good. The thing that we're trying to drive there is we tend to think of it as combining knowledge and experience gives you wisdom, and there's often a lot of knowledge that's shared, but the knowledge without sharing the relevant experience actually doesn't contribute that much. So we're looking to bring people together who are able to bring knowledge and experience, collectively contribute that to make wisdom, and then reapply that stuff as you go along.
I would sound a slightly more cautionary note, though, in terms of talking about organisations sharing it. I think I'm still very much experiencing the trying to get it shared within organisations themselves, and management commitment has a huge part to play in this. It is senior management asking questions in a non-confrontational way, however regularly, but as I do agree with Dave, it's an ongoing conversation, but it is getting that message across that actually I'm interested in how we can apply this to the next piece of work coming up. So let me share with you the next piece of work that we're planning to come up.
Right.
And can you help us? So it's a question of senior management turning to project teams and saying, can you help? Have you got any creative ideas? Now, if you start asking somebody if you've got any creative ideas for overcoming these potential problems, what you're actually doing is effectively asking for lessons learned. Because your creative ideas are, well, we did it that way last time, it didn't work. So we're actually turning it from a lessons learned, which sounds very much past tense, sounds very much like, well, you should have learnt your lesson by now, to let's hear about some creative ideas, possible solutions. So I think part of what senior management have got to do, if they really want to make lessons learned work in their organisation, continuous improvement, is change the language.
Yes.
Let's talk about creative solutions. And if we can get it right for organisations, then I think that overall culture, there can be more forums where senior managers will come together from other organisations, but I don't think they've got it sorted in many places right now.
So that's another area where board level communication is vitally important, isn't it? But that's about the philosophy of an organisation, isn't it? As to whether they take that more open approach.
Absolutely. Yes. We tend to find that more agility tends to be of benefit everywhere. The agile approach is difficult to say. We know what is the agile approach. I prefer more to think about agility, and projects and programs are always going to exist on a spectrum between those which are going to be ultra agile and those which are going to operate in a more traditional fashion. And in the end, it comes down to what's the purpose of the project that you're doing, what's the environment that you're working in. If you're working on a project or a program where things are relatively well known at the beginning and the requirements are relatively well understood and the technology you're working with is relatively well understood and relatively proven, then there is still some merit in doing some in-depth analysis and design at the beginning and creating a plan and following that through to fruition. If you're working in a situation where the requirements are vague, where you know that they're going to change and where the technology is uncertain and unstable, then a more agile approach is definitely beneficial. Fact is, we're doing more projects like that than we were in the past, so it's becoming more and more prevalent. But I wouldn't say it's the only answer to every circumstance.